I did the Money Wise podcast this morning.
And what was that about?
So Money Wise is a guy named Sam Parr and Harry Morton. And what they do is they interview people not about how to get rich, but what happens after you're rich. And, so shit like, what are the economics of a private plane? What are the struggles raising kids? That sort of stuff. And Sam had tweeted out, who do I have on the show? And Colin had said, you got to have Yates on, blah, blah, blah. So he had me on.
And the other piece of advice is don't get fired.
Well, I think the whole reason they wanted to have me on, because, my net worth theoretically went from $150 million at one point to 82,000. And, how do you deal with that? And it's like, I don't know, my coffee order didn't really change at Joseph's, Tacos at Larry's.
The things that really matter in your daily life don't change. And you realize you don't need that much.
Yeah. No, it's, I'll tell you this. This morning we spent probably 45 minutes at Joseph's with Mr. Coleman betting Keith that he couldn't figure out how to turn on the car radio in his car. Somehow Mr. Coleman finds this brand new Genesis he has in the high-tech board in front, crazy, and he has to call the dealership 3 times a day to figure it out. And Keith, and he was willing to bet $100, and Keith was so cynical, going, I need proof the radio actually works before I make this bet. Well, and the reason I wanted to tell you that story, because you've met all those cast of characters down at Joseph's, but what's funny about that is, probably 2 or 3 years from now, we'll be sitting around Joseph's, and we'll have that same bet again.
Oh, yeah.
Just
of course.
Yeah, and I think in terms of what that does, kind of, for me and my psyche and my mental health, to be able to kind of have those mornings, I think's really important, particularly coming on the heels of the weekend we had and what's going on in Central Texas. And so, if it's all right with you, Mark, can we do fuck energy this week and just talk about
Absolutely.
Central Texas? Cause
it's been a few days like I've never experienced. We were talking on the phone earlier about, this place is very personally meaningful to both of us, not only for us, but individually, but, our kids as well. And before that. So it's just one of those incredibly devastating and almost unimaginable events that, at least for me, caused a tremendous amount of reflection in a number of ways. And
yeah, no, the thing that struck me, and we'll start talking, and it wouldn't surprise me if I start crying at some point. Just that area is really special, like you said. But I mean, it really hit home with me when the announced death toll is now higher than Hurricane Harvey. And we all remember how bad Hurricane Harvey was when it hit Houston and how devastating it was. And, more people have died kind of along the Guadalupe River over the last few days than that. And just, it's been horrible.
My mom and dad moved to retire just down the river in Comfort back in 1987, and that was the year of another big flood event where I'm sure you remember when the Pot of Gold camp, there was a church group from Baptist from Dallas area, Segoville Baptist Church, was trying to evacuate, and they lost 10 campers who were in a van and a bus, one of whom of the 10 was never recovered. And so, that part of the world is, I say, used to that type of event, but certainly nothing like this. And we as a family have a long hunt camp experience, not at Mystic, which was just devastating. I woke up Saturday morning or Friday morning. I'm still in North Carolina. Kind of glanced at the news, and I was thinking about OPEC meeting on Saturday and what that may mean. Talks of ratcheting up the volumes that they're going to be bringing back on in August and September, and then all of a sudden, the news reports got really, really intense, and then you start to look at the magnitude of what happened in the very early hours of that, and then the Camp Mystic came into the conversation, and it was all just so very surreal. And having spent a lot of time recreationally in that area over the last 50 years of my life, my girls went to camp just down the river at Heart of the Hills, which is just down the river from Mystic. And the dozen years that either dropped them off as campers or what we call Heart Lights, pre-counselor. It's like a counselor in training after you finish your last year as a camper at age 16, and then returning again as counselors. It's just a very, very profound part of the lives of girls and families that have been fortunate enough to have that experience in that part of the world at those camps. Mystic and Heart of the Hills, there's Camp La Junta, there's Waldemar, Camp Stewart for boys, and many others that are right there on the North and South Fork of the Guadalupe that over generations, girls and boys have spent summers there, just in incredible growth and development and adventure. It's something that's quite unique and very close to us, as a family, because our girls all had that that experience. And in fact, my wife was a camper in the mid 70s at Heart. The camp director, Jane Ragsdale, who owned and directed the camp since '88. She was a program director starting in 1978. She was one of the first, at least, identified victims. And fortunately, Heart was between month-long sessions. So the second session was actually set to begin on Sunday the 6th, which, and that camp received quite a bit of damage and destruction as well. So I'm kind of rambling here, but
for one of my good friends from Rice lived in Leakey, Texas, and every year for the 4th of July, before we had kids, after we had kids, we'd go out to Leakey. They always had a parade through downtown Leakey, and we do that. And we always stopped and hunt at the general store on the way back through. Not that part of the Guadalupe, but, used to go tubing down the Guadalupe River, all the time. Floated the Frio a whole bunch in that area. And so that area has always just had a really special place in my heart. Because you're right. I mean, so many of my girls wound up really liking the camp at the Museum of Natural Science in Houston, so they did that during the summer instead of going away. But so many of their friends went to camps all throughout that area and come back. And, I'm sure your wife still talks about meeting some of her best friends at that camp during the summer.
In fact, my youngest daughter, my girls, I have 3 girls, they're all, at or over 30. And my youngest daughter, who lives in Austin, was at in Hunt on Memorial Day weekend, there were a group of Hart alums that were celebrating at one of her camp friends' family's house, which is actually on the riverside of 39, pretty close to town. And unfortunately, her younger brother, who's a college student, this camp friend's younger brother, Aiden Hartfield, who's a college student in San Antonio, he and his girlfriend and two of their friends were in the house on Friday. They've found the three girls, but Aiden is still missing. I looked at the latest update, so it just I kind of flash back to drop offs, and you're dropping your girls off for a month, and they can be as young as 6 years old, and we started pretty early, and because I knew about that area from spending a lot of time there as a kid, just like you. I started back in kind of the mid 70s. A buddy of mine had a family place on the West Fork of the Frio, about a mile outside of Central Lakey, and I've been to all those parades. We do the long float from their place all the way to Utopia River Bridge, where there was, when we were old enough, there was a big kind of blowout party. And but you also know that, and there were on a few occasions, there was times when the rain hit the headwaters in the watershed, and we'd see water up over the outdoor patio where the bunkhouses were at my buddy's place. So you kind of knew that stuff happens really quickly. But again, going back to dropping my girls off, and it's a big deal when it's certainly when it's their first time, and you're leaving them in the care of someone else with a large group on the river. I told my wife the other day, I said, look, I always kind of kept an eye on the weather when they were gone, because I knew how quickly things could change. But I never imagined anything like this, for sure. And so I can't fully put myself in the place of one of the, speaking at it from a dad girl perspective, I can't put myself in the place of one of those dads and moms who have lost their baby girls. It's so profound.
I think that's why it's hitting me so hard, is just sitting there. That literally could have been a Yates girl. I mean, it would not have been weird for Kelly to be over there as a counselor. And the other thing that's really getting to me is just the stories of heroism that are coming out of this. I mean, you've got the story of the counselor that woke up the kids in waist deep water and got the kids up into the rafters. And there was a clothesline up there that they would dry things on. And she told the kids, hang on to the clothesline. Do not let go of the clothesline, no matter what. And she got down because she was going to go look to see if there was a path to safety, got swept down the river a mile. Fortunately, she grabbed a tree, survived, got rescued to get back to the girls, and all the little girls made it. They were all clinging to that clothesline. They were supposedly within 2 feet of water, but they all made it. And, Harry Broach, who's working for us this summer, has a friend that was a counselor and got all the kids up to the rafters and figured out at some point that the rafters were going to be underwater. So he was grabbing the kids, swam down out a window, got them up on the roof, and he sat there and went back and forth and eventually got all the kids out. The last kid had about 6 inches of air, but he eventually got them. They all made it. And just, the various owners of the camps out there trying to save kids, it just breaks your heart.
Dick Eastland, who was, Dick and Tweety Eastland, who I never actually met, but was quite familiar with them because that camp community in Hunt is such a tight-knit group. They've been there literally for 50 years, just dedicating to those camps. And when you think about the fact that Mystic had 700 campers on site in that session, the just the amount of work and love and passion that goes in to creating that experience, and how much over generations that it's been such a valuable thing in the growth of a young girl and a young boy's life. Jane Ragsdale's husband, Dick Howell, passed away a few years ago, but he was very involved in directing Camp Stewart for boys. You'd always see him at Hart, but he was, running up and down the roads and the river, just taking care of making sure that the full camp experience was the best it could possibly be. And you just get an appreciation when you go for closing ceremony, like we used to go to pick them up, and they have a big closing ceremony. And you're amazed at how well run things are, how everyone is extremely cared for. And as the years passed and we would have successive summers, I got more and more comfortable with the fact, because there was a lot of anxiety going into your first experience. But then, after you got past that as a little girl, you couldn't wait to go back and see your friends that, may have been from other towns and schools, and some from out of state, and I think some from out of the country. I know the counselor staff, at least our experience from Hart, they're girls from all over the world working at those camps, and so they all got to discover the magic of that place, which is really what it is.
And it's definitely hit close to home. I don't know where we are on the ethics or the quote unquote rightness of mentioning names, but we've definitely had people in the energy business who have suffered direct losses. I know a prominent oil and gas CEOs whose niece, unfortunately, was a victim. CEO of a prominent energy company whose daughter lost, and so it's definitely hit us hard. And kind of one other thing I just want to say is we do need to have a deep dive here to figure out what happens and can we do better so it doesn't happen again. But just to anybody out there listening, now is not the fucking time to do that.
Now is not the time. And you saw my outburst on Saturday. I was extremely disappointed to see barely 24 hours after disaster struck, there was not to be named member of EFT who since deleted the post, immediately politicizing it about the National Weather Service, retirees or ex-NWS people had warned of the needless loss. Something's going to happen at some point, resulting in a needless loss of life. And then the middle kind of part of that was it didn't take long. It's not the time for that. And the notion that the NWS is responsible for any kind of response. The people in that part of Texas pretty well, the natives and the people who live and make a living in that part of the world. They are some of the most self-reliant, tough individuals in the state. I mean, each region of the state has its own character and profile, but the success stories that you were alluding to in the earliest stage of the response tell you that that there's a lot of courage and a lot of selflessness that is just part of the character of the people in that part of the world. And I would just go on to say that it's a long road back, but I hope and pray that we get that area, those camps and that community back on their feet. And it's just such a, it's such a magical and place that has such a profound impact on, literally it's been over the, at least in our affiliation, thousands of young girls who are way better now as women because of it. One thing I did want to mention, and we can share it. I saw a story yesterday in USA Today. Jonathan McComb is working with one of the private search and rescue organizations. He was the father and husband who lost his entire family in the Blanco River flood of 2015. They were in the house that ended up breaking up against the bridge. And in his last moments, before he decided that he was going to live, he knew his wife and 2 children were washed away and probably gone forever. He asked God what he wanted from him, and okay, I'll do it. And very shortly after that tragedy, he dedicated himself to working on search, rescue, and recovery. And he's down there now. And so if there's anyone who can, provide counsel and comfort to those that are still waiting, or those who have realized the worst kind of loss that you can imagine, he does know what you're going through, and he's one of the few. So none of us can say, even as parents of young girls and young women, I can't imagine. I can't get to that level of understanding. It hits me when I, at kind of the oddest times, I'll see one of the little girls' pictures, and it really, really, just really takes your breath away, in the saddest kind of way. So I hope the tribute to these girls and young women and the camp directors that lost their lives is that they can go on after we've taken the time and corrected things, if there are things that need to be corrected. I know it would be an incredibly difficult thing to carry on, to have parents trust because of what happened, because just so the scope and scale are so unimaginable, and the extreme impact of this disaster. But I think ultimately, years down the road, if it can be restored and carry on, I think that would be an incredible tribute to those that dedicated their lives and those that lost their lives in this tragedy.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, definitely, our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to everybody affected by this, and quite frankly, everybody in Texas, because at the end of the day, folks can say all they want about us, but we are a really big family, and I know this affects every Texan to some degree or another. And
I had a former colleague reach out to me just to put a kind of a public service announcement. The community fund of the Hill Country, you can look it up. That is the most direct destination for donations that will go and have the impact where those things are needed. It is a locally administered fund that existed before this, but my friend said, I don't want to go through the Red Cross. I don't want to go through any of the other national organizations. And so the community fund of the Hill Country is really, I think, the best place for those that are looking to help monetarily.
My church here, St. Mark's in Houston, is actually directing people towards the Episcopal Church in Kerrville, and as it happens, the rector at the Kerrville Episcopal Church used to be my parents' rector in Richmond, Texas. So I can definitely vouch for him. He's a good guy. But anyway, well, appreciate you talking about this, Mark. It's just been brutal.
Yeah, brutal's doesn't begin to describe it. And I, pray for God's comfort for all of those that have lost friends, family, children. It is it's just an unimaginable thing.
There are no magic words for this time. The one thing I'll kind of close on, because I think this is some of the best advice I've gotten from Priest Patrick, who we both know very well. I was one time talking with Patrick, and I said, "Oh my gosh, that's got to be the worst thing you do in your job is, going to the deathbed or going to comfort a family when a tragedy's occurred." And Patrick, in not a snarky or joking way, said, "It's actually the easiest thing I do." And I go, "You got to be kidding. What are you talking about?" He goes, "In those times of tragedy, people don't remember what you said. They only remember if you were there or not." So Patrick's advice is show up. So hopefully all of us Texans can find a way for somebody that was affected by this tragedy to just show up.
For sure. Well, thank you for jumping on and doing this. It's just part of the process. That
Yeah, absolutely.
I think presence and being there in the immediate aftermath, but that there's going to be a need for that for weeks, months, years to come for many of these people. And let's not forget those who have been out on the river doing the grim work of search and recovery and going through that every day. I mean, we still have what I saw the latest update, over 170 people still missing with 130 fatalities. So,
and the number is going to be higher than that. I mean, you just like at those RV parks, you check in, you pay cash. There's not a record that you were necessarily there. And so,
yeah. So what they're doing is, all the law enforcement is receiving inbounds and they're cross-checking lists. And unfortunately, I told my wife this weekend, I said, because of that, there was rightfully so focus on Mystic because it was so hard hit, but you knew who was there and, the identifications of who was there, who survived. And that was a big concentration of people, but there are people scattered all over that area, just weekending. And, I couldn't think of kind of a confluence that was more disastrous than certainly the burst of rain from that Pacific and Gulf tropical system, the stationary aspect of it being deep into the night, early in the morning, and 4th of July weekend.
Yeah. No, I mean, that very easily could have been me heading over to Kerrville to go see Robert Earl Keen, because I've done that before in my life. And I'm not, Laura would have known that I was going if she didn't come with me. But there are a lot of people potentially like that it's going to take a while to figure out that, yeah, they had headed over. So anyway, well, Mark Meyer, I love you, dude.
Love you too, man. We'll, I guess we'll get back on energy next week.
Yeah. And anyway, thoughts and prayers to everybody out there.